People said you're too sensitive, too reserved, too silent, and the word too just keeps echoing in your head like a warning label. You don't hate people, you just can't stand pretending. You're not shy, you're tired. Tired of filtering every thought just to survive a conversation. Tired of nodding to things that don't matter. Tired of acting like small talk is oxygen when it suffocates you. They call you antisocial, distant, cold. But what if you're none of those things? What if you're just smarter than them? Not in some arrogant, elitist way, in a way that hurts. In a way that sees too much, feels too much, and still chooses silence. Because most of the world speaks a language your mind refuses to mimic. You're sitting in a crowded room. The noise wraps around you like a storm. Laughter, footsteps, clinking glasses, a dozen half-finished conversations floating in the air like static. Everyone's smiling, nodding, engaging. You're nodding too, smiling. But inside it's different. It's like there's glass between you and them. You can see the game. You can even play it, but you don't feel it. You scan the room and wonder, why does none of this feel real? Why does small talk feel like betrayal to your mind? You tell yourself maybe you're shy, maybe you have anxiety, maybe you're just bad at this. But what if you're not broken? There's a strange kind of pain that comes from knowing too much, from seeing behind the curtain while everyone else cheers for the show, from sensing the mask people wear while they celebrate the roles they've been assigned. You've felt that pain, haven't you? The kind where you're in a room full of people and still feel like you don't exist. Not because you hate people, but because the performance exhausts you. Carl Jung once said, loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you. Maybe you've tried to explain yourself. Maybe you've been told to lighten up, to stop thinking so much, to be more normal. Maybe you've even started to believe that you're the problem. But you're not antisocial. You're just smarter than them. Not in a boastful way, not in a narcissistic way, in a deeply human, painfully aware way. This isn't about superiority. If any part of this already feels too real, then maybe you've been carrying questions no one ever helped you answer. Why do you feel exhausted by the world everyone else seems fine in? Why do you crave truth while others chase noise? Why does it feel like your mind is wired for something deeper, but the world keeps trying to flatten it? Stay with me, because by the end of this video, we're going to unpack why this disconnection exists, why you feel like an outsider, and why Carl Jung believed people like you weren't broken, just ahead of their time. You're not alone in this. So before you scroll, ask yourself, what if the answer you've been looking for is already inside you? Keep watching. Let's go deeper. This is about sensitivity, about perception, about a mind that sees too many angles, feels too many layers, and therefore struggles to find peace and simplicity. You don't need fixing, you need understanding. And maybe Jung was trying to give us the words we never had. From the moment you were born, the world handed you a script. It told you what to say, how to act, what to want. It taught you the rules before you ever had a chance to ask if the game was worth playing. In school, you learned how to raise your hand. In meetings, how to nod in agreement. On social media, how to perform your personality like a costume on stage. And the better you followed the script, the more applause you got. Conformity became currency. Fitting in became survival. But what happens when you can't fake it anymore? What happens when your silence in a group meeting isn't apathy, but internal conflict? People say you're not trying hard enough. They never ask what is in your head, just why it won't match theirs. In modern society, sameness is safety. Divergence is a threat. There's an invisible line, and those who step beyond it are quietly punished. Not with handcuffs, but with labels. Not with exile, but with indifference. You've felt that, haven't you? The invisible chill when your ideas go too deep. The awkward silence after you say something real. The way people smile, then slowly pull away. As if your thoughts made them uncomfortable in a way they couldn't explain. Carl Jung called this the tyranny of the collective persona. The public mass society wears to keep order, to maintain the illusion that everyone agrees on what's valuable, what's true, what's normal. The more you are like most people, Jung wrote, the more successful you are. And he was right, because modern systems don't reward authenticity. They reward compatibility. To be accepted, you must reduce yourself. Edit yourself, perform yourself. And if you refuse, you're not praised for your depth. You're pathologized as too intense, too serious, too much. You might even believe them. You might start to wonder if your emotional exhaustion is a flaw, if your craving for solitude is a weakness, if your intuitive sense that something feels off about this world is delusion. It's not. You may be tapping into something Jung called introverted intuition, the rare ability to perceive unconscious patterns, to see truths before they're said, to feel the undercurrents that others dismiss. It's not mystical, it's psychological, and it's deeply uncomfortable to those who live only on the surface. Because to see beyond the mask is to threaten the game. The world doesn't punish you for being quiet, it punishes you for being awake. And the more awake you are, the more alone you often become. There's a quiet moment that happens in everyone's life when the crowd is cheering, but you've already walked away. You didn't leave because you hate people. You left because the noise started sounding like static. The faces blurred, the conversations felt rehearsed, and inside you, something began to shift. Carl Jung called it individuation, the path to becoming who you truly are, not who the world trained you to be. It's not a glamorous journey. It doesn't come with applause or celebration. It comes with silence, with discomfort, with the deep ache of being different. Because the smarter you are, the more you notice. You notice contradictions people ignore. You see the roles they play, the stories they tell themselves to survive. You see the way they avoid the truth about themselves, about others, about the systems they worship. And when you start to see too much, it becomes harder to belong. You're not just listening to what people say. You're hearing what they don't say. You're sensing the tension behind their smiles. You're picking up on lies they haven't even realized they're telling. How do you sit at a table and talk about weekend plans when your mind is orbiting questions about meaning, identity, existence? How do you share space with people who never question the script? The truth is, awareness comes at a cost. You begin to lose connection with the world you once felt part of. The more you uncover who you really are, the more illusions fall away. The more honest you become, the more you realize how much of society depends on dishonesty, of emotion, of thought, of behavior. Friedrich Nietzsche knew this. He said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." But finding your why often means losing your place in the how everyone else seems content with. Arthur Schopenhauer lived alone for most of his life, not because he despised people, but because he saw them too clearly. He once wrote that the more intelligent a person is, the more they prefer solitude, not as a retreat, but as a necessity. And maybe you felt this too. The world keeps telling you to get out more, to socialize, to mingle, but your soul keeps whispering, stay in, go deeper. There's something inside you that needs your attention more than any conversation out there. Solitude isn't the absence of connection, it's the presence of truth. And while it may feel like you're drifting further from the crowd, you're actually moving closer to yourself. That isn't loneliness, that's transformation. You've probably heard it all before. You're too quiet. You need to get out more. Why don't you talk like everyone else? But what if the silence isn't a symptom? What if it's a sign? A growing body of research has begun to uncover something both fascinating and unsettling. People with higher intelligence often exhibit behaviors that society mistakes for dysfunction. You withdraw, you avoid small talk. You prefer silence over noise, depth over drama, meaning over momentum. Not because you're antisocial, but because your brain works differently. One study published in the British Journal of Psychology found that highly intelligent individuals report lower life satisfaction in densely social environments. Why? Because frequent social interaction, which stimulates most people, tends to exhaust those who process information more deeply. The same interaction that energizes others can leave you craving isolation, just to feel like yourself again. Have you ever needed hours to recover from a 5-minute conversation that felt forced? It's not just in your head, it's how your head is wired. You might experience something called dopamine sensitivity. Your reward system is tuned differently. Most people chase stimulation, parties, gossip, endless notifications. But for you, too much noise becomes a wall of static. It doesn't light you up, it drains you. Your brain is processing more layers. While others skim the surface of a conversation, you're catching inconsistencies in tone, micro-expressions, subtext. You're not just hearing words, you're feeling intention. This isn't anxiety, this is neurodivergence, and it's exhausting to explain that in a world that doesn't even stop to listen. There's also something called sensory gating. People with high cognitive complexity often have a harder time filtering out irrelevant stimuli, which means everything hits harder. Lights, sounds, emotions, facial expressions. You feel the world at full volume, so no, your need for solitude isn't a weakness, it's maintenance. Loneliness and solitude are not the same. Loneliness is a hunger, solitude is a choice, a sanctuary, a reset. When you choose stillness, you're not running from the world. You're realigning yourself with it. The tragedy is this: society often misreads your wiring. Quiet becomes rude, intensity becomes weird, reflection becomes apathy, and so the deep thinker becomes the outcast. Because shallowness is easier to understand, faster to digest, more comfortable to control. Carl Jung warned us that modern life is deeply hostile to the inner life. We live in a culture that worships visibility, speed, and simplicity. But intelligence thrives in the shadows, in the unseen, the unspoken, the slow. So if you felt like the world wasn't built for you, maybe it wasn't. Not because you're broken, but because you're rare. They tell you to work on yourself. They say you should go out more, smile more, speak up. Get better at pretending you're enjoying things that feel empty. Not to heal, not to understand, but to fit in. You're told your silence is a symptom. Your solitude is avoidance. Your depth is dysfunction. You're sold therapy not to understand your mind, but to dilute it. You're handed self-help books that promise to turn your uniqueness into palatable pieces. And when you resist, you're called difficult, cold, disconnected. This is the quiet tyranny of the modern world. It doesn't want to understand you. It wants to normalize you, because normalized people are easier to manage, to market to mold. So you start to mask, you edit yourself in conversations, you fake enthusiasm in crowded rooms. You keep your real thoughts quiet because you've learned what happens when you say them out loud. You laugh when you're supposed to. You mirror emotions like a script. And no one sees the performance. They just assume you've adjusted, but they don't see what it costs you. The migraines after a day at the office. The hollow feeling after yet another party where you said all the right things. The slow erosion of your inner world every time you trade your truth for acceptance. On dating apps, you're told to be more fun, more outgoing, more accessible. In the workplace, you're trained to network, not connect. To perform confidence, not cultivate curiosity. At social events, you're celebrated when you talk over others, not when you pause to think. You're rewarded for becoming a version of yourself that feels foreign, lighter, louder, less real. Why is no one asking the harder question? Why are you expected to get better at faking it instead of the world learning to listen? Carl Jung didn't ask you to be more normal. He asked you to live your own myth, to stop chasing validation in systems that never understood you to begin with. He believed that each person carries a unique psychological blueprint, something only they can discover and only they can live out. But that path isn't loud. It isn't celebrated. It doesn't show up in trends or algorithms. It begins in stillness, in solitude, in discomfort, in finally hearing your own voice after years of muting it. So no, you're not broken for wanting to leave the party early. You're not wrong for finding peace in your own company. You're just done pretending that noise equals meaning. And maybe, just maybe, that's the most honest thing about you. What if everything you've been told about yourself is backward? What if the withdrawn one isn't lost? but actually the most aware? What if the person sitting quietly at the edge of the room isn't disconnected, but simply refusing to be consumed by noise? We live in a world that glorifies the visible, the outspoken, the constantly connected. Those who perform best under the spotlight are labeled as confident, successful, charismatic, and those who retreat, misunderstood, avoided, antisocial. But Jung saw something else. He spoke of the outsider, not as a failure of society, but as a necessary product of it. The one who steps away not because they can't keep up, but because they've seen too much. There is a pattern here, a thread that runs through history. The Buddha left his palace not because he was broken, but because he realized the palace was. Nikola Tesla, alone in hotel rooms, sketching invisible machines with a mind so far ahead the world could barely follow. Van Gogh, painting his pain in silence, surrounded by misunderstanding, yet guided by something no one else could see. These were not recluses. They were seers, architects of truth, observers of reality from the outside in. Carl Jung once said, "In all chaos, there is a cosmos. In all disorder, a secret order." To find that hidden order, you have to be willing to stop playing the surface-level game. You have to stop chasing approval. Stop drowning in distractions. Stop confusing activity for purpose. You retreat not to disappear, but to see clearly, to observe the patterns everyone else is too busy to notice, to question the rituals that pass for normal, to feel the undercurrents beneath the performance. This isn't about superiority, it's about lucidity. You don't see yourself as above others, you simply see what they can't or won't, the mask, the noise, the machinery humming beneath daily life. And when you refuse to participate in that machinery, they call you antisocial, cold, detached. But the truth is simpler. You're not trying to escape humanity. You're trying to find what's real within it. So the next time someone calls you distant, ask yourself, distant from what? From empty rituals, from shallow conversations, from systems that pretend to care while quietly draining your soul? Maybe distance isn't a problem. Maybe it's the beginning of vision, not a wall, but a window. And through that window, you don't just see the world, you understand it. Awareness is not always a blessing. Sometimes it feels like a burden. When you begin to see through the illusions of society, of people, of yourself, it's tempting to fall into cynicism, to believe that nothing matters, that connection is fake, that everyone is asleep, and you're cursed with being awake. This is the shadow side of awakening, the part no one talks about, the lonely slope between enlightenment and isolation. Carl Jung understood this. He wrote, "No tree, it is said, can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell. The higher your awareness climbs, the deeper your roots must dig into the darkness of the human condition, into confusion, into pain, into the things you once tried to escape. Because seeing too much without grounding can lead to detachment. Not the peaceful kind, the hollow kind, the kind where you start believing you're above it all, that no one can reach you, that you no longer belong to this world. But you do. Your vision isn't a weapon, it's a tool. You weren't given insight just to watch the fire. You were given it to carry water. You don't have to return to the chaos. You only need to learn how to move through it differently, with presence, with mindfulness, with creative expression that turns confusion into meaning, with compassion for those still trapped in the fog. You're not here to escape the world. You're here to help build a better one. And that doesn't require noise or performance or fitting in. It just requires you not to disappear. Stay human, stay engaged, stay real. You were never antisocial. You were just waiting for the right language to explain your difference. All those moments you questioned yourself, all the times you felt like a ghost in your own life, they weren't signs of failure. They were signals, clues pointing towards something deeper, something real, something rare. Carl Jung knew that becoming yourself isn't a straight line. It's not about finding acceptance, it's about finding alignment. Individuation, the process of becoming whole, is not comfortable. It's not quick. And it's not something you can do while trying to be what everyone else expects. It's lonely, but it's honest. And once you taste that kind of truth, you can't go back to pretending. So no, you don't need to speak louder, or shrink yourself, or follow a path that was never meant for you. You just need to keep becoming, keep evolving, keep searching for the version of you that isn't shaped by fear, or pressure, or expectation. Because in a world that rewards imitation, choosing authenticity is a radical act. They may never understand you, but Jung would, and maybe that's enough. You were never too much. You were just surrounded by people who couldn't hold your depth. You were never antisocial. You were just waiting for a world that spoke your language. If this resonated with you, if even one sentence felt like it peeled back something buried inside you, then don't let it end here. Subscribe, because we're building a space for minds like yours. Like the video, not for me, but for the version of you that finally felt seen. And tell me in the comments, what's the one thing you've always wanted to say, but never felt safe enough to voice out loud? You're not here to fit in. You're here to wake up. And this is just the beginning.